The Sunday Show on Newstalk 106 to 108.
Welcome back to the Sunday Show. Shane Coleman with you until 1 o'clock. Now, it's almost a month since Israel began their latest assault on Gaza. In that time, at least 1,000 lives have been lost. Fighting, of course, broke out when Israel retaliated for the kidnap and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers by Hamas. But condemnation of Israel's heavy-handed approach has grown in Ireland in the past fortnight. Lots of protest marches taking place. The Irish government, of course, criticised last week for abstaining on a UN vote on the issue. But is our attitude towards the conflict influenced by our own experience with Northern Ireland? And I suppose, does that in turn raise the question, are we somehow biased against Israel? To discuss this, I'm joined by columnist Eamon Delaney and by Hugh Lewis from People Before Profit, of course, a councillor. Hugh, of course, was on board the MV Saoirse, which attempted to break through the Israeli naval blockade to Gaza 3 years ago. Eamon Delaney, can I start with you? Because I think it's probably fair to say you would have been someone who would have been described as someone who was more sympathetic than most columnists to Israel. Do you think we're in some way biased against the Israeli state in how we cover it, particularly in the media, how we cover it?
Yeah, both media. Well, I wouldn't say biased. I'd say Ireland is very critical of Israel, officially, politically, and in terms of media. And there always has been. That's the way it's been since even...
We are regarded by the Israelis, I think, as probably
as well, they say the most hostile EU country. I mean, I don't know, there's 28 countries now, but certainly we were up there with them. And I went on a press trip about 2 years ago, and the Israelis were giving us the whole propaganda thing of, look how small the country is, and look at how great it is, and they show you the wall, they show you Gaza being blockaded. It's strange, Israelis. They show you the things that you think a PR person shouldn't show you to try and make their case. But he said you're also going to get a helicopter ride to show you how really sure. And most European journalists don't get that, but you're Irish and you're a tough nut to crack, so you're getting a special privilege. And it's kind of surreal. You fly over Jerusalem and you're suddenly in a different zone and not. And there's many reasons for that. And Rory Miller wrote a book called Ireland and the Palestine Question, which I was going to bring along, but I'm citing it now. It's a very good book. He charts the history of Ireland and Israel and Palestine from the 1930s on right to the present day. It's got to do with the holy places, Jerusalem. Then it's got to do with Ireland's heavy involvement in the UN in its formative years in the 50s and 60s. And we kind of locked on to the feeling that the Palestinians were, dispossessed. And the land thing...
We identified with them, I suppose.
Very much so, yeah. And there was no Jewish population here as well, remember, or very little. Sorry, the first president of Israel was from Dublin, but that aside, there was very little. But there wasn't much of an Arab lobby either, in fairness. So we identified with them. And it's kind of strange because it became part of our foreign policy. So when I joined Foreign Affairs, it was already a given that Ireland leads the way on UN resolutions against Israel and takes a hard line. And it kind of gave us a standing, because we're quite a small country, on an issue. So we led from the front on it. And so in recent years, as in recent decades, foreign ministers, Micheál Martin, Cowan, Dick Spring, of whatever colour, have been consistently critical of Israel.
Okay. Hugh Lewis, what would you say to that argument? And is it a text here from Mark saying, I'm sick of the media and their anti-Israel stance. Let's have balance and historical facts. I, like many Irish people, support Israel and the Jewish people totally. How would you respond to that argument that maybe we are less than impartial?
Well, firstly, I would say the media isn't necessarily pro-Israeli. I think it's the opposite. And I think if you ask most people...
Pro-Palestine, you mean?
Yeah, pro-Palestine. I think the dominant kind of hegemony in the media isn't to be necessarily pro-Palestinian whatsoever. And I think the majority of people would actually reflect that. And I think one difference that has kind of come out in this current kind of onslaught by Israel is the fact that social media has played a key part. The images that have come out from Gaza are not easily undermined by Israeli propaganda, and I think the relationship between Irish people and any oppressed people is that of solidarity. And obviously, as a country that was under occupation ourselves, we can identify with Palestinians in that sense, and we have a proud tradition for standing up against the oppressor as well. If you look at South Africa, the very important role the Dunn Stores workers took against apartheid in South Africa. So it's not the first time Irish people have sided with the oppressed. And I very much hope that we can do as much as possible and go much further than what our government has done. And our government stance recently has been a complete and utter disgrace.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that in a moment.
It's kind of interesting irony that the Israelis, of course, were inspired by the Irish independence struggle. I mean, that's that's long gone now with the Palestinian. But like that's quite serious. Actually, that's not exaggerated. I was in Israel actually on that trip when Shamir died, Yitzhak Shamir, and there was constant talk about his nom de guerre, Michael, called after Michael Collins, inspired by and Menachem Begin was impressed by the IRA's ruthless methods against the British. And there's a feeling
of
kinship.
Ironically, in the north, you have sort of PLO flags being flown in nationalist areas and Israeli flags.
And many things have changed the way people line up in terms of this issue. The left and right, that's one thing which wasn't always the case. It used to be the left support, or some of the left supported Israel. But another major factor which people in Ireland may not be aware of is that Christian evangelicals, which are huge in America and very influential in the political culture, are big supporters of Israel, because Israel is a biblical prophecy. Although they have to be destroyed in this biblical prophecy to satisfy the Christian evangelicals. But in the meantime, they are supported as a state.
To come back with our attitudes in this country, Hugh, I think Eamon has made the point in some of his columns that in the past that we are very critical of Israel at times, but and you see protests outside the Israeli embassy, but you very rarely see protests outside the Iranian embassy, or protests in relation to what's going on in Syria and the atrocities that are being committed there.
Well, I think partly that is due to the international attitude towards Israel in comparison to other countries. The actions of Israel are legitimised by Europe, for example, when they refuse to vote on a motion.
We will come back to that motion in a minute.
I don't think it's a moralistic stance just against Israel and in support of Palestine. In comparison to all of the other.
The point is, are we picking and choosing the issues that we want to be outraged about?
Well, people pick and choose issues every day of the week. If people want to stand up and campaign and protest against another oppressor, I'd be happy to do that. But I think when people see over 1,000 people being killed in the space of 3 weeks, it's obvious that people will have some solidarity with the people of Palestine, and ultimately people know that the Palestinians have not got the capabilities to liberate themselves, give themselves justice. So again, similar to the apartheid in South Africa, there's a reliance on people across the world to use collective and individual action in support of Palestinians, and not rely on our government or other governments that have taken a very weak stance recently.
It's interesting to make the parallel with South Africa, because there's a lot of the reasons I think there is this monopolistic focus on Israel is because they're European settlers, kind of what the left sees a colonial experiment by the West, supported by, even though it was created by the vote of the United Nations. I mean, it's kind of a self-hating thing, because the reality is that the Iranian embassy in Blackrock is completely untroubled by any protest to do with the fact that at the moment Iran and Russia are pumping arms into Assad. 160,000 people, not 1,000 dead, 160,000 dead, not a murmur throughout the Irish political or media landscape that I can see. Sri Lanka killed tens of thousands of people in the finish of its civil war a few years ago. It wasn't just in Ireland there's silence. Internationally there was silence. They got to host a Commonwealth Summit. So, like you say, people can pick and choose their issues, and that's absolutely true, and we can't have a big heart or attention for every issue. But like I saw a very impressive demonstration of Connaught Street yesterday, and thought, wow, would just a portion of these people turn out for other human rights issues?
Absolutely, they would.
Hugh, does that not show?
As I have done, and others on the protest have done, and we would stand in solidarity with any people that are suffering across the globe, in whatever country it be. But people are particularly animated about Israel because Israel is legitimised across the globe by the actions of our governments and other attitudes. And it's not a case of is our Irish people biased towards Israel. It's the bias that the European Union and America show towards Israel. You compare, for example, the sanctions issued against Russia recently. Wouldn't it be glorious, to say the least, if sanctions and action were taken against Israel in the same respect? And the difference in Iran and Israel is that Iran is not held up as this beacon of hope and of democracy like Israel is. That's the difference.
What about the argument as well that the role of Hamas in all of this is ignored? That while I think most Irish people at this stage, and I suspect even Eamon, you would accept this, that the Israeli response has been wildly disproportionate. That there's no angels in this war. That Hamas have behaved. I mean, they're firing rockets constantly into Israel. They're killing innocent people as well.
Well, this conflict didn't start 3 weeks ago. It started in 1946 when Palestinians were displaced and ethnically cleansed for their land. But I'm not in a position here to argue and defend for Hamas. The vast majority of people that have been killed by Israel in the last number of weeks have been civilians. Our job isn't, our role in Ireland shouldn't be to support any particular party or
But we are taking
stance.
sides. We are taking sides. That's the
We're
point,
taking
isn't it?
sides with the oppressed, absolutely, but we're not taking political sides with a particular party or a particular philosophy. We're taking a human stance, and I think that's what most people that were on that protest were there yesterday, because, again, Palestinians themselves need this international support. They have called for a boycott of Israel, they've called for divestment, they've called for sanctions, and I'd encourage anyone that wants to get involved in the issue to join the Irish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, to get active in the issue, because ultimately it's only going to be until our own government and other governments are forced into it by collective action from people, and it's people power ultimately that's going to make the difference.
Eamon, you can't defend what Israel have been doing in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's impossible to defend, isn't it? I mean, it's
it's not even a matter of defending it. It's just the whole thing is just so depressing. Yeah, it's hard to defend what Israel has been doing in many respects for the last few years. Never mind for the backdrop to this that we haven't spoken about is, and this is for people like me who would have been in Israel, lived there, and would be sympathetic to what they're doing or their whole journey. I would disagree about the ethnic cleansing. I think. But let's not go back to the history.
we won't go back to 1946.
But let's just go to one issue, one word: settlements. 500,000 settlers in the West Bank now. I mean, there's supposed to be a peace process, and the Israelis are supposed to be, engaged in it with the Palestinians, and this is not Hamas with the other Palestinian groups. And it started when I was in Israel in '82. There were like 5,000.
How did you get so into?
You see, we were talking about this earlier before you came in. Israel used to be the big hippie trail, backpacker,
the
kibbutz thing, and a completely different country then. It was idealistic. I was on a kibbutz, which was a left-wing experiment, where all these foreign people were there.
You went there to meet girls, basically.
Swedish girls by the swimming pools, and you worked for 4 hours and picked fruit.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it was in a very interesting time because Begin had been elected, and all that wonderful left-wing kind of idealistic original.
Yeah, because it was a socialist state, wasn't it? As well,
it was.
Yeah.
But after 14 election defeats,
well, I would contest that it was a socialist state. I mean, it's
a
matter of interpretation. That's socialist.
Your
definition
is very
offensive statement in itself.
Okay, well, let's just say broadly speaking that was what it was. But then Begin was elected in '81, and I was there around the time of '82 when they invaded Lebanon, and it all started to go wrong. But no, just go back to the settlements, because even then there was great opportunities for peace, and there have been great opportunities. I think those opportunities are lost now, personally.
Yeah.
Like Oslo 1, Oslo 2 particularly, Ehud Barak, he walked away. They blame Arafat. I think there was a deal there to be done. But they went all during that time, they went on, and I have to use the analogy of a former Irish diplomat to the region. He said, Eamon, it's like two people are arguing over a pizza, but one of them is eating the pizza. And that's the thing. There's nothing much left to create a state. So that's the backdrop. The Gaza's different, but it's all part of the same land.
Okay, lots of text coming in on this. Israel is a modern democracy in an area that despises human rights, equality for women and LGBT community, among other things. The chattering classes in Ireland would have their beloved civil rights eradicated in a Muslim country like Palestine. That's Alan in Dublin. Another texter says Ireland needs to demand the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador and cessation of trade with Israel. Horrendous war crimes being committed. Another texter says anti-Zionism is completely different from anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm anti-Zionist, as practiced by Israel in its subject territories. And one last text. There is never any talk from the media or the left about the attacks from Hamas on Christians in Gaza. That's from RM in Wicklow. Let's talk, Hugh, you mentioned this issue of Ireland abstaining last week on the vote. Eamon, I suppose as a former diplomat to you first, because you were in the you worked in the UN. Were you surprised by this decision, or were they just acting in concert with the other European countries?
They were. I wasn't surprised, and I think they were acting in concert. I mean, I've actually spoken with this decision on other radio shows during the week, and really this is diplomacy. I mean, I know it kind of shocks people and depresses people. I saw a piece in Sunday Indo there about it. But we're not going to break ranks with the EU on this. We didn't break ranks with the EU on Bosnia when they were looking to defend themselves. So we're certainly not going to do it on this. I can see the rationale that we should have the inquiry afterwards. The conflict is ongoing. Diplomacy is not something which moves in immediately on a conflict. It is a cop-out, though. There's no doubt about that. But that's the diplomacy is a cop-out thing. It should be said, though, that the motion was not balanced. It didn't specifically name Hamas, but it named Israel right through. And I think if Hamas...
The motion wasn't balanced because the conflict isn't balanced. That's
well, look,
there
is a conflict because two parties are conflicting. I mean, those rockets are not coming from the moon. You know, they're coming from somewhere, and they're flying in from Hamas. But if they'd named them, they might have got a chance of passing resolution. But no, I wasn't so surprised. You know,
you obviously think you're obviously outraged, and have expressed it already at Ireland's decision. But Eamon's point is, look, this was diplomacy working. Sometimes you have to. Well, you have to play the game, I suppose.
The point was made there that Israel is a democracy. I mean, what example of democracy has our government done last week when, in my opinion, it ignored the wishes of the vast majority of Irish people? I think, you know, if you ask people their position on Israel and Palestine, it's very obvious to most people where they should lie and what side they should support. And it's not a big case of choosing Israel or Palestine. It's a case of justice. And I'll give you one example. Yeah. We did a stall yesterday demanding the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador, and had a petition, and we had people 5-6 deep in Dunleary demanding to sign that petition. So there's the example.
Okay, Eamon, unfortunately I don't have time to come back to you. We're bang out of time. My thanks to columnist Eamon Delaney and to Hugh Lewis of People Before Profit. Back in a moment.
The Sunday Show on Newstalk 106 to 108.